Welcome back. Hour number 2 of Spooky South Coast. Well, it's hard to say hour number 2 because we only kicked it off with 15 minutes, but we'll try and make it up for you on the other end as long as everybody's all right with that. But we are talking about the paranormal as we do each and every Saturday night. And actually tonight we're doing a special edition of Spooky South Coast because, as I mentioned in the first part of the show, there's been 2 cases in which voodoo has come up. And I don't want to say 2 cases in which voodoo was involved in the crimes. I don't want to say in which people practice voodoo because I think we need to kind of get an idea of what voodoo is. And I learned about it, years ago, just a little bit. I mean, I don't know very much. But one of the first things that I learned about it is that when you hear people saying that they are practicing voodoo and doing things in the name, using voodoo to do things to people, they're probably not actually using voodoo. And so I feel like we need to really get an idea of what it is before we can kind of look at these crimes and say, is there something going on with it here? So we're very, very fortunate to have joining us on the line Hoodoo San Moise, who was raised in Southern Conjure. And from the time he was 4 years old, he was learning the work of conjure and hoodoo. He was learning about the spirit and how important the ancestors are in his life and work. And he's also a high priest now, and he is joining us from New Orleans. So give me a second here to push a couple of different buttons. But we will get him on the phone. And San Moise, are you with us?
I am. How you doing?
We are doing spooktacular. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. Well, it's Mardi Gras here in New Orleans, so everything is kind of a little crazy right now. But other than that, it's pretty good, yes.
I appreciate you joining us on what must be a very busy time with Mardi Gras. But then again, it's not like the party's ever going to stop, that you can't just, join us for a bit and then go out and join in the festivities.
Well, that is true. The party doesn't really ever stop here. But, that's neither here nor there. I was listening. Also, just so everybody knows, I am what's called Ugan Asogwe, a high priest in Haitian voodoo as well. Yes, I was raised in Southern Conjure, and that's kind of a cousin. But I am in both traditions, okay?
So what is the difference between the two?
Well, when it gets right down to it, hoodoo in and of itself is really, it's primarily just magic work, whereas voodoo is a religion. I hate to use the word, but just so folks will understand, is an entire religion that is about honoring God, honoring the ancestors, and working with the Loa, or the spirits of the voodoo.
So there is, for those who are unfamiliar, and again, as we mentioned, you're joining us from New Orleans. So I've been down to New Orleans. I was very fortunate to get to go there a couple of years, going back again later on this year. I love the city. I love the people there. Fantastic place. But it's not like it's something that is right out in people's faces. There's some shops and some different things where people can go and look into this, but it's not like it's something that is, most people who practice this, you don't know that they do.
Well, in some places that may be true. I will tell you that in New Orleans, that is true in part. It depends on how you define the term, not in people's faces, because I can tell you this, I can take you to a graveyard right now where you'll see all kinds of stuff going on that ain't got nothing to do with the gravestones or what have you. You'll see all kind of work that's going on that's there. So New Orleans is one of those places that, it's not necessarily directly in your face, but if you look close enough, you can see it everywhere. Take, for example, if you go into St. Louis Cathedral, which is, one of the big Catholic churches here. You go into there, and there's a section, where they have candles that are, that there's lights that they set for folks and stuff like that. You can go in there and you'll see things like, coins, and you'll see things like, mojo hands and, stuff like that are set next to them, to give, whatever dead that they're trying to honor, to give them, extra, edification or what have you. But like I said, it's not something that's like necessarily directly in people's faces, but it is all over the place here.
I mean, I know that there is some degree of those who do it as a business, those who do it for the tourism angle, all the different shops that you can go to, and I know that some are legitimate and some are kind of just for show.
Well, yeah, that is true. There are some folks that that are here to put on a show. I can't speak for them because I'm not one of them. Like I said, I'm an Ugana Sogwe in Haitian Voodoo. So I spend a lot of time between New Orleans and in Haiti, every year. We do ceremonies here that anybody is invited to come to, because most of voodoo ceremonies are actually open to the public. But when it comes down to why people are, what their motivations are for doing what they're doing, I mean, every man and woman has to work out their own salvation, so I can't answer for that. I can only tell you that when it comes to the voodoo in and of itself, the voodoo in and of itself is about honoring the ancestors. It's about overcoming oppression. It's about honoring God. It's about working with the Loa, and it's about creating change in people's lives. That's what it is, simply put,
And none of that sounds like it's anything even remotely negative. It sounds like it's very positive and very much something, of the positive, of the good, of the light.
Of course it is. It absolutely is. I mean, I will tell you this, that, a big issue, over the years that has happened when it comes to the voodoo is that, the media in Hollywood has kind of bastardized it and turned it into something, that it is not. And like, for example, I'm gonna get on a little, I'm gonna get a little soapbox here for a second. Like, sure. For example, let's say American Horror Story Coven. They had this, the show, which was quite entertaining, absolutely. But then they, they bring out a Loa who they call Papa Legba, who was this dude with a Jamaican accent who ate babies and snorted cocaine out of his little pinky nail. Get the hell out of here. That could not be further from the truth of A, who Legba is, number one, but B, who the Loa are and what they do. That is just an example of how the media has taken, something that is one thing and completely tried to turn it into another. And unfortunately, a lot of people believe what they're fed. So they'll see that on TV and they'll be like, "Oh my God, Legba eats babies," or something, some dumb shit like that. And that's not at all what the voodoo is about. That's not what we do. That's not how we operate. And that certainly is not how that Loa is.
It's just, I think that there's been so much of the Hollywoodification of voodoo that it gives people that, it because it's mysterious, because it's something that people don't know about, it's easy to fear it, and it's easy for it to become something that becomes a device for scaring people. And when you look at the way that Hollywood has portrayed it, it has taken away and stripped away a lot of what you're talking about, the actual tenets behind it, and it's turned it into something that's just there to freak people out.
And that's exactly, what it has done. And that has absolutely nothing to do with the voodoo. And I'll tell anybody, any one of my ceremonies that I do, anybody is invited to. If you want to come to Haiti to a party ceremony is synonymous in the voodoo, just so as you know. Because it's a ceremony is a celebration of the Loa, it's a celebration of God, it's a celebration of the ancestors. Anybody is invited to come to that, to see, what exactly goes on. And I can tell you that there have been quite a few folks that are not in the voodoo who have come to ceremonies, that we have done, have come to to see exactly, because they were curious, because of, things that they may have heard or things that they may have seen, or what have you, that have had one particular, idea, that they're trying to convey about what the voodoo is, which was, a complete falsehood, to see what exactly it is. And like I said before, the voodoo is about honoring God, honoring the ancestors, honoring the Loa, and working with them to facilitate change in our lives. That's what it's for. That is the thing that it was born for, was to facilitate change. I mean, hell, look at the Haitian Revolution, for example. It was about overcoming an oppression that was there. And it took the voodoo to do that, to actually have the only successful slave revolt in history, because there was such an oppression there that the spirits came down. And what they did was they turned the tide in order for the people that were the slaves that were there to defeat Napoleon's army, not once, but twice.
Well, we have another caller on the line, and Stephanie, I'll let you introduce our caller who's joining in.
Yes, so I believe this is our very good friend Crystal Madison, who is known as the Witch of Sleepy Hollow.
And
Let's
we're
bring her
going
on.
to push her through here. Make sure I lock everybody in. Are you with us, Crystal?
I am with you. Hello.
All right, and great. Thanks for joining us. And Sen, you can hear her okay?
I'm sorry?
Sen Moise, you can hear Crystal okay?
Oh, I can hear her just fine. Hey, Crystal, what you doing?
How are you, honey?
Sometimes, when we try to bring multiple people on, sometimes the technology doesn't work with us, but it seems like it's working okay.
I had an echo on my end until you put me through, so
yeah, you might still get
clear as day now.
Okay, good.
So there's an actual question in the chat room that says, is voodoo similar to Santeria? And is that the case at all?
We have the perfect people on for that question.
They come from a similar place. You have to understand, when the people of Haiti and people of Africa were being enslaved, so were the people from Cuba and other countries. So what you had going on here was they were being converted to Catholicism. They didn't have a choice. And correct me if I'm wrong on any part of this, and Moise, on your end. They didn't have a choice. So they started realizing that the Catholic saints were very similar to the Loa, as far as, the Haitians and the Africans went. Santeria is similar, but different. There is a much heavier Catholic undertone to Santeria.
I would call it like a cousin to the voodoo. Like Santeria and the voodoo would be like a cousin.
Okay.
Right.
Because they do come, they do originate from different places, but there are crossovers in both that are very, very similar. So I would say that it's more like like I said, it's like a cousin.
Because we do have, in this area, in New Bedford, we do have a good portion of people that practice Santeria.
Yes.
Right.
And it pops up in the news every couple of years where, and it's never an issue where there's any kind of crime involved. It's usually a health inspection issue. Is that they'll find out that somebody was conducting Santeria rituals with chickens, and they were not kept in sanitary conditions.
Wasn't that a recent thing where
there was
a
one
girl
that
murdered a bunch of chickens
and
locally?
They can't do anything
and there was
about
just
it because
blood
it's protected
everywhere and posted online.
As a protected religion, right?
Yep.
We have a very large Puerto Rican culture in this area, and Portuguese and Spanish and from all over. So that.
Well, that's why a lot that Alan Alves had found was a lot of Santeria was going on in the Freetown Forest during the 70s and 80s.
And when we're talking about voodoo, Sen, we're talking about this being something that is, as you had mentioned, it's very much for change. So what is how does somebody normally practice voodoo? How does somebody go? What would be like a typical thing that you would do to conduct one of these ceremonies?
Well, ceremonies come about like walking you through. How do I do this? Basically, it comes about to where like there are a whole bunch of offerings that are prepared, like different foods and stuff like that the spirits, the Loa, that they like. There's drummers that come, and the ceremony in and of itself is all about, like I said, honoring God, honoring ancestors, and working with the Loa. We give the Loa honor. We call to them, and they come down. Possession happens very frequently in that. And the reason, possession happens is because the spirits want to commune with us, and they do in a very, how you say, up close and personal way. And so, like what'll happen is that there'll be an altar that's constructed that has all these different offerings and stuff that they like, because when they come, to, what's called, to ride the horse, or the schwal, as it's called in Creole, there are things that they may want to take into themselves, to partake of, to eat, or what have you. We sing songs to them, we salute them, and basically what it is it's, like I said, the word ceremony and the word party are kind of synonymous in the voodoo. And so it's an honoring, of those spirits, an honoring of God, an honoring of our ancestors. And at the same time, it is a form of communion with that, because when the Loa come down, they may come down because somebody has been doing some things that they shouldn't be doing, so they may want to scold somebody. They may want to do healing on somebody. They may want to give some sort of a blessing to somebody. So there's all kinds of things that go on, during a ceremony. But basically, I can tell you this, that, it doesn't involve, like, us, eating babies or drinking blood or any of that crap. Well, that Hollywood likes to portray it as, but it's more
and I just attended your ceremony
the purpose
last
of a
month.
ceremony is communion to the spirit.
And it was the most honest. I've been to a lot of rituals, a lot. I've been doing this a long time. I have never attended a ritual or ceremony that was as beautiful as this one. And I went in, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what to expect. And we got there early, and everybody worked together, making food, setting up the altar, cleaning the space. It was really a very touching experience.
But in opening yourself up for these spirits to come down and take possession of you, and opening yourself up that way, is it possible that something negative or something evil could come in and do the same? There must be a yang to that yin, and there must be some sort of darker force for the good, and is it possible that they can come and take you over?
In the context of a ceremony when that's going on, no. And that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, the first thing that we do is we pray. We do what's called the Priye Guinea, the prayer of Africa. We're praying and praying and praying. And so there's protections that are set up, number one. Number two, if something were to slip through that, we have a lot of priests and priestesses that are there that we know what to look for, and we recognize, and if something is there that's not supposed to be there, we can make sure that it goes away real quick.
Okay.
Well, see, the reason that I ask is because, we've had these cases, and I know that you're a little bit familiar with what has been happening up here, but I'll give the audience a little bit of a primer on it too, as I ask these questions, because we have two cases within the course of a couple of weeks of each other of these things happening, and actually the news of them happened within days of each other. But we have this story of there's two sisters, Peggy Labossiere and Rachel Hilaire. From what I understand, they're of Haitian descent. They live in a town called, was it East Bridgewater? East Bridgewater. And this mother, who knows them through her hair salon, thinks that her 5-year-old daughter is possessed by some kind of a demon, or maybe she's just expressing to these women that there's something wrong with her daughter. They come to the conclusion that there's a demon possessing this 5-year-old girl. And so the mother takes the two children, they move in with these two sisters for a while, and they're conducting these rituals where they're blowing fire into the girl's face, permanently disfiguring her. They are rubbing, they're taking plants and they're rubbing it on the boy, including his genitals. They're threatening to cut off his head. This doesn't sound like what little I know about voodoo. It doesn't sound like any kind of ritual or ceremony that would take place.
And I couldn't agree with you more. But what I will say when it comes to that is that, a lot of times when people do things that are outlandish and crazy or whatever, it always turns to the devil made me do it. And I would say to this, what is the difference in that than than a couple of like teenagers going out into like a cornfield and like killing something in the name of the devil? Really, there's no difference. But when it comes to the point of being responsible, the voodoo made me do it, or just and quite frankly, like it's dumb and it's outlandish. But here's the thing: is that when somebody doesn't want to be responsible for something that they did, they will try to shift that to something else, to take the spotlight, so to speak, off of them. And quite frankly, what it sounds like to me is that, you have a case, or cases, I should say, of some sort of mental illness that's going on there to where they felt that they needed to do that. Because if indeed that was the case, what would have happened would be that child would be brought to an Ugan or a Mambo, and we would have taken care of it, not in that way, but we would have taken care of it to where like there could be healing, there could be restoration, or whatever was needed to go on, to bring the child back to wherever they needed to be.
So if I felt like I had a child that was possessed by a demon, first of all, can a child be possessed by a demon in voodoo belief?
Can a child be possessed by a demon?
Yes. Could there be some sort of a negative force or entity or something that's controlling this child and making this child misbehave in that belief set? Would somebody who was a person who practices voodoo, would they recognize when somebody comes in and says, "I think I have a demon"? Would they say, "Oh yes, that's probably a demon"?
Okay, so being possessed by and having a spirit around you are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Possession, active like possession by a demon, no. That's not something that's going to happen. Can you have a negative spirit that's around you? Yes,
okay.
That does happen. And that's not just in the voodoo. That's in many traditions.
Right.
That's in many belief systems. But being able to recognize what is what and being able to discern what to do about that to correct the situation is a whole nother thing. And, like from what you're describing to me about taking and like disfiguring like the children to try to drive away, the quote demon or whatever the hell it is that they're talking about is foolishness.
So what would be the process then if I brought you somebody and I said, I think there's something influencing my child and making my child act this way? It doesn't sound like it would be anything even remotely close to this. It would be kind of the opposite. It would be to attack this with as much, love and positive energy as you could.
Right. I mean, there are ceremonies that can be done. Absolutely. There are ceremonies that can be done and things that can be done to remove that from them, but it's not involving like mutilation or anything of that sort, because remember, the voodoo is all about the spirit. So guess what? If it's all about the spirit, then what do we rely on to facilitate these changes? The spirits themselves. So why would we have need to start to mutilate somebody or basically torture them, to quote drive away the demon or whatever it is that they were saying? We have no reason for that. If something needs to be done to make a spirit leave, we can make a spirit leave. That's just the way that it is. But all of this, like with all of that, that they're talking about, with that, that's a bunch of foolishness.
Somebody in the chat room said, well, then all those people must be mentally ill. But when you think about it, we talked about it earlier, us three, Tim, me, you, and Stephanie. What are the chances that all three would be mentally ill? Right. There's got to be something, like you said.
You have a mother that's buying into this.
I understand, and I see where you're going with this, but here's the thing. I don't know that it is a case of all of them being mentally ill, but you also, you have to think about it in this way. You have somebody who may be mentally ill, who has a strong influence over people that are weak-willed, and just willing to say, okay, to everything that somebody else does, and they'll go along with things. But I can tell you this, and I can tell you this with 1,000% certainty, as somebody who spends, like I said, I spend a whole lot of time in Haiti. As a matter of fact, I'll be back in Haiti in May. As somebody who spends a lot of time, in Haiti as well as, here in New Orleans, that what they're talking about, that has nothing to do with the voodoo. Nothing. And that's another one of those cases, in my personal opinion, it's another one of those cases to where it's like, the devil made me do it type of thing. Like I said, it's no different than somebody, going to a cornfield and like, sacrificing something or killing a kid or whatever in the name of the devil. It's no different. And there's always more than one, and usually the ringleader is the one with the mental illness, and the other two are just, dumb enough to follow along.
It's no different.
Look at the Salem witch hysteria.
Yep.
Right.
Very good example.
And what's funny about this is, in the people that I've spoken with and speaking with you, Sen Moise, over the course of this week, and Crystal, I know in your knowledge base as well, like these things that these women were doing to these children don't ring any bells to anybody as being any kind of ceremony for anything. Like
not at all.
It doesn't sound like there's any kind of beliefs, even if you could say, well, that's not voodoo, it's this being miscategorized as voodoo. Like there just doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to what it was they were doing.
Not at all. It's not voodoo. It's not witchcraft. It's not. Children are sacred. Children aren't harmed in voodoo.
Well, with that being said and being put aside, let's say it wasn't a child, it was an adult. Do they actually, in any type of rituals that voodoo is done, witchcraft is done, do they burn, like not say burn the person, but do they actually like light a fire over them, like blow the fire over them, because it's supposed to remove the demon out of them? Is there something like that takes place that they could possibly be representing, trying to copy?
Absolutely not. The only time people have been burned are those who were accused of being witches.
Yes.
Yeah. That is not a part of our practice. I guess I'm not an expert in voodoo. Sen Moise is, but I have attended a ceremony, and it was nothing like that. Nobody was in a fire. Nobody was being burned. When I first heard this story, I messaged him immediately, and I sent him the link, and I was like, you have to read this. I'm like, this sounds like illness. This is not anything that I've witnessed or anything I've experienced or partaken in. He said, absolutely not.
It just seems like it's random, like just kissing the child like a snake, and setting people on fire and threatening to cut somebody's head off. It just seems like it's like, let's come up with the most horror movie tropes that we can come up with and try to claim that that's a ritual.
Yeah.
Well, like what our friend Aaron said in the chat room, maybe there's a local sect of voodoo that is bastardizing the religion. It takes one bad apple to get a bunch of followers and then teach people the wrong way. And I deal with that a lot. God, even with Reiki, with being a psychic medium, we all have that one story that pops up where this horrible medium con somebody out of 20 grand and then people just keep going and going and going because they're sucking people in, and it could be something very similar to that. One jerk decided to do it the wrong way and get a bunch of others on board.
That's scarier to me. I would rather think that there is a vibrant voodoo culture here, and it's the kind of voodoo that Sen Moise is talking about. I would rather think that there's something like that going on here, and that there is a few bad apples that don't get it, or a few people who are trying to co-opt that for themselves and having this happen. The bigger picture of this, because we're going to get into this other case here now, is I'm really afraid that there is an entire group of people that are practicing it like this.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. Obviously there is, and it needs to be shut down. But how do you do it?
That's what's scarier than just thinking that there's these two things. Let me just give you the details.
And I'm wondering, before you go on to the next one, is the Brockton police, the Bridgewater police actually working together to see if, when they question these people, is there, and I hate to use the word cult, but is there a cult group or a group gathering that's going on somewhere, like you say, to practice this and learn this the wrong way?
Even worse, what if they're doing something totally different and just blaming it on voodoo?
That's or is it possible that it's just they're not even mentioning the word voodoo, but it's just this is what the people who are reporting
Because
it
of
back to
Hollywood.
them are
Yep.
thinking about it.
Yeah.
So let me just give Crystal and Sen Moise the details of this other case, because this is heartbreaking. Latarsha Sanders was arrested Monday, January 5th after stabbing her 2 young sons, 8-year-old Edson Marlon Brito and 5-year-old Lasan Brito, to death as part of a voodoo ritual. The 2 sons were discovered and that's in quotes, I should say, quote, voodoo ritual. The 2 sons were discovered dead inside their home on Prospect Street in Brockton. Edson was stabbed approximately 50 times. When asked why she stabbed the boy, Sanders told police, quote, "It was because of the voodoo stuff." According to court documents, she said she stabbed him because she had failed in the ritual with Marlon. She failed in the ritual with the older boy that she had stabbed 50 times, so then she moved on and stabbed the 5-year-old boy. And family members told police that Sanders was into voodoo and was obsessed with the Illuminati rituals and sacrifices. This sounds to me like somebody who, just went online and looked up voodoo and got the wrong idea.
That is a bunch of cockamamie bullshit.
Thank you.
Voodoo,
I was hoping you'd
Illuminati.
say it before I did.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh no. Number one. Number two. Everything that you're that is nothing at all. What we do. It sounds to me like somebody done looked up some stupid ass article on Wikipedia and is trying to put the blame on something else other than themselves, because they decided that they wanted to try to do something, whatever that might be, and then ended up killing their own kids, probably, and God forgive me for saying this, but on purpose for some other reason. I guarantee that there is way more to that story than what's being said. I guarantee.
Because bottom line, whether you look something up or try to do voodoo or witchcraft or whatever it might be on the internet, you don't touch your child.
No, you don't.
Right, and
It's
that's
disgusting.
And there actually, one of these stories, I have a pile of papers in front of me, but in one of these stories, Plymouth County DA Timothy Cruz says, we have to let people practice whatever beliefs that they want to practice, but no belief system should ever involve harming a child, and that's where we have to step in. And I've heard from people all this week when talking about this. Some people have told me there are some belief systems, not necessarily voodoo, but other belief systems where they do involve the children in rituals, but they would never murder them, they would never stab them, they would never harm them in any way.
Still not okay.
And I just, especially where the lady says, Sanders says, it was because of the voodoo stuff. That doesn't sound to me like somebody that actually knows what they're talking about when it comes to this.
No.
Nope.
Of course not. Of course not. They have no idea what they're talking about. And I will tell you that in ceremonies, do kids come to ceremonies? Yes, they absolutely do. Do kids work the voodoo? Yes, they absolutely do. But again, we go back to the tenet of what the voodoo is: honoring God, honoring the ancestors, and working with the Loa. That has nothing to do with anything that's being described on here. What it sounds like to me is again, somebody's trying to shift responsibility onto something else because they don't want to be, responsible or accountable for their own actions.
I'm taking a look at this story, and I reached out to Sarah Klein, who works for the Enterprise. She's a writer for the Enterprise newspaper. She's been working on these stories, and she compiled a great piece where they look back at some other cases that have happened in the immediate area of these 2 cases over the last few years. And I didn't hear back from her in time, but I want to give her credit for being the one to have researched this. But in 2014, there was a woman named Florence Bolillo. So again, we have a French-sounding name, so it could be somebody of Haitian descent. And she's a mother of 4, was found dead in her Forest Avenue apartment. Her estranged husband, Jean-Michel Bolillo, who is probably, at least French or Haitian, was arrested for murder. And one of their friends said that Jean-Michel had used voodoo as a scare tactic against Florence, placing voodoo candles on her doorstep, putting a crucifix and white powder in her home. Is there a darker side to voodoo? Are there spells that can be... and spell's the wrong word, ritual, whatever. I apologize if I'm mischaracterizing anything, but are there things that can be done in a negative way to bring harm to somebody?
There are negative sides to everything. And just as the voodoo has a positive, there are other things that can be done. Absolutely, yes. I would be lying to you if I told you otherwise. But I will tell you that in the voodoo in and of itself, the way that it is, the way that the tradition works, the way that it is that, again, we go back to honoring the ancestors, the Loa, and honoring God. Now, are there other things that can be done? Yes. Is this what this sounds like to me? And first of all, I'd love to know what a voodoo candle is, because I mean, I'm a priest and everything, but I never heard of that. I don't know what that is. But secondly, when it comes down to it, what you're looking at is that, did somebody try to cause harm to somebody else? Yes, they did. Are they using, the voodoo, apparently as whatever is being described here as the nation? Yes. Does that mean that that's what it is? No, it doesn't. Is there a darker side to it? Absolutely there is, as there is everything. But at the same point in time, we also have responsibilities to do what we're supposed to do, to make sure that things are right. And, if somebody decides that they want to, to say, well, I did this because, I'm using voodoo scare tactics on somebody, that's on them. But that in no way does that mean that is what, is actually going on. And it's not.
I think you both will agree with me. There's a negative side to everything, like you said, but it's all about your intention. It doesn't matter what religion is backing you up or behind you. If you have intentions to harm somebody, that's what your intentions are, no matter what.
Correct. If you look at the voodoo doll, here's a good example of something that's been taken.
That was my next question.
And turned into a scare tactic. You see the memes, and I am guilty of it too. I'll post a funny meme up there. Do you feel it now? Like things like that. But, those dolls were originally meant to heal. You insert the needle in certain areas to heal the person of an ailment.
That's very interesting.
And now you see, I don't know if you can blame Hollywood or mass merchandising, but that's what those dolls originally were used for. It wasn't, in other cultures, in other traditions, they're called poppets. Mm-hmm. If you walk down Essex Street in Salem, just about every shop has a doll in it. So
I was going to bring that up.
It's a type of sympathetic magic.
There is a shop in Salem that is actually, I believe the owner has ties to New Orleans. And I walked in the other day, and there was a bunch of voodoo dolls in there that were made with real bones, supposedly, and they were not meant to do good to anyone. So I was going to ask you what your take on that was.
But just because they had real bones in them?
I'm confused. I don't know if it if that's something that's typical to using in a voodoo doll, but they were advertised as not not in the way that you described, not to heal others or to do
that was
good
their
to
original
others.
Intent.
But can you do bad with them?
Sure.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's funny that you bring that up, because it wasn't but maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I actually passed on some information to Tim, and Tim, you remember the case that I gave you about that voodoo doll
in the haunted objects books, haunted objects book I wrote about it. Yep. That was a very, so if I have this right, you had been told that this object had caused problems for this family.
Supposedly 3 deaths.
And it was a fish doll.
Yep.
That was kept in some sort of an ornate box.
Yep. With candles.
And from what I understand, if I remember this right, there was the gentleman had picked this up, probably working on the docks with some of the Brazilians and the Portuguese that were down there. He picked up this item. He was told that he could use it because he wanted to cause havoc for his sister and his mother. And it ended up coming back and biting him in the ass, and ended up making him very sick, and he died.
Yes.
And so then they ended up finding out that he had this going on. He was conducting ceremonies with this. And so you had said, I don't know anything about this. I don't know. This is just the story I was told. And I started doing some research, and I had come up with macumba, which I'd never heard of before, which is a type of supposedly Brazilian voodoo. Is that anything that either of you are familiar with, the idea of macumba?
I've heard of macumba, and I know a little bit about it, but can I tell y'all a big secret that's not really so much of a secret?
Sure.
It probably is to us.
Dolls in the voodoo.
Mm-mm.
I'm sorry, what was
I think voodoo and hoodoo are so interchanged. Hoodoo is a practice. Voodoo is a religion. Sorry.
Yep.
And there's a difference. It's just like Santeria is a religion, but brujeria is a practice. There's a difference. I mean, but they're
what my question is, though, is like, for instance, that case that I dealt with where these 3 family members did die. So there was actual pictures of the family members on the doll, and where the pins were and the pictures were is where these people actually died from different things. The mother actually had a spine problem. I forgot exactly. It's been a few years, but her picture was on the back of the doll, pinned in to the spine. The sister had some kind of kidney problems and ended up dying, and I forget if it was cancer in the kidney or whatever it was, but her picture was pinned to the kidney. Those are some pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy coincidences. So could there actually been some type of voodoo magic that was going on to make that happen?
Well, the thing is I think you're incorrect when you talk about voodoo magic when it comes to the doll. Now, like me personally, can I work a doll baby to do good or to do, not so good? Absolutely I can, and I can tell you how to do it, but I won't do it on the air.
Okay.
But the thing is that in the voodoo itself, we do not use dolls. Like, period. We don't use dolls like that. Like, that is not a voodoo thing. That whole voodoo doll thing, that is another thing that has come about because of the media and Hollywood. Actually, if you want to go back to it, like the doll baby and stuff like that, you have the European side, which is the puppet, and then you also have the Congo side, which comes from the Nkisi, or the wooden statues with all the nails in them. Like, that's where that comes from. It has nothing to do with the voodoo, but it has been, like the term voodoo has seemingly become an umbrella term for all kind of, whatever bad things are happening. It has become a bad term to describe that, which is absolutely a farce.
But and as we said, though, it only takes one person trying to bastardize that belief set, and the fact that there is so much mystery around it that people just don't understand it. That's what's playing into a lot of this. Sen Moise, is this something that, like you said, people can come and see these ceremonies that take place? It's not a big secret. It's just something that people don't know about.
It's something that people may not know about, and the education that they get is either from watching movies or from the internet. And here's another gigantic secret: you can't learn voodoo from the internet, because I'll tell you this: that about 90% of what you find on the internet about voodoo is how do I put this nicely? Not true. And when it comes right down to it, like I said, about 90% of voodoo ceremonies are actually open to the public. Do you know why? Because the voodoo in and of itself is something that is oriented to the community as a whole. It is something that is not that is not a solitary practice. It's not a solitary thing. It is oriented to the whole community, the town, the village, what have you. It's oriented toward all that. So anytime a ceremony is going on, everybody is invited to come. Like they're really like the secrets that we have are things that, yes, we absolutely do keep, but to see what goes on, anybody pretty much can.
So there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to, nothing that should be looked upon negatively. It might be a different belief set than your own, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong, and it doesn't mean that it's anything that goes against what it is that you believe. I mean, that's the biggest thing that we hear, working in the paranormal world and working with, ghosts and things of that nature, and Stephanie having her mediumship abilities, is people will say, oh, well, that goes against God. But it doesn't. It sounds like everything that you're talking about goes hand in hand with many other religions and other belief sets. It's all the same idea. It's just different ways of practicing and different ways of acknowledging the ancestors and God.
You're absolutely right. But it's funny because you just said something that I found to be quite interesting. Is that, like people will say, like, you were talking about like with Stephanie's like mediumship abilities and, et cetera, how, it's something that goes against God. Well, let me ask you a question. Who the hell determines what is for and what is against God, and how do they determine that?
Right. It's all constructs of man anyway.
It's all man-made, written in books that people carry around with them.
I boycott religion anyway, so we won't go there.
You have to have faith in something.
No,
Yes, I do, but I'm just saying the organized religion part I boycott.
Yeah.
I think it's silly because you just end up judged, and I tell everybody all the time that I wouldn't have the gifts I do if God didn't give them to me.
The reason why I feel that way is only because when I went overseas for a tattoo convention, I happened to be in Milan, Italy, and you guys know, even if you haven't been there, there's huge, beautiful, beautiful cathedrals there. We went to walk in. The priest actually looked at me, my boss at the time, his wife, and said, "You guys aren't welcome because of the way we were dressed, because of our tattoos." We argued with him that this is a house of God. We should all be let in. Wouldn't do it. Turns around, as we're walking away, he's taking money from other people to put into his church. And then here comes a gentleman wearing military uniform in a wheelchair pushing himself up the ramp. He goes to go in, and he literally grabbed him, spun him around, and pushed him away and said, "I've told you to stay away from here. You're not welcome. You take our money." So we ran back, got the guy, took him away, gave him some money. But that's when I totally lost and denounced against organized religion because of that. You know, anybody's supposed to be welcome in God's house.
All right, religion was created to control some and to allow for, you know, the rise of a few. And it doesn't sound like that's the case with voodoo at all. It sounds like voodoo is something that's very, you know, inclusive with everyone and something that, you know, encourages camaraderie and companionship among people.
I think it's fascinating. I want to know more.
Companionship is something that is absolutely necessary. And I'll tell you this, the voodoo is very familial. You know, it is about the family. It is about the community. Because why? You know, and I'll go back to this again. You know, when we're talking about, like, you know, the Haitian Revolution, you know, took a community to do the ceremony of Bois Caïman to come together so that the revolution could begin and so that they could be free from the oppressors that were essentially not only enslaving them but murdering them and torturing them and doing all kinds of horrible things. So another, you know, tenet of the voodoo is community. It's not there is no like singular anything when it comes to that. It is about the community as a whole, coming together as a whole to honor God, coming together as a whole to honor the ancestors, coming together as a whole to honor and to work with the Loa. Like, that's what it is about. It is not about, like, you know, any of this, you know, like this dumb shit where these people, you know, talk about, like, you know, oh, the voodoo made me do it crap. Like that has nothing to do with what the voodoo is. Not now, not ever.
All right. Well, that seems like a good place to leave it. Before we let you go, Moise, why don't you tell us how people can come and find out more from you if they are going down to New Orleans, like, you know, maybe 3 people in this room might be doing.
Yes. Are you around in November?
In New Orleans in November?
Yep.
Yes.
I will be here in November, yes. I'll be actually up in, where will I be? In New York in October. I'll be over teaching over in Sleepy Hollow in October at Crystal's event.
Well, John and I will be there, so we'll see you there.
We will see you there, but me, Tim, Stephanie, and Porter are all going down to New Orleans in November 9th
to the 11th.
Yes, so we should definitely all get together and meet up while we're down there.
Oh yeah, that'll be great. I'll be here.
We want to check out your shop and we want to learn more. So educate us, please.
Yeah, absolutely. You can come. You just come down here and we can do whatever it is y'all want to do.
And
you know, like if people want to find me, they can find me on Facebook under Voodoo Said Moise. I co-own a store in New Orleans called Conjure New Orleans at 506 Dumaine Street in the French Quarter. I'm teaching around the country, so, you know, depending on what time of year will kind of depend on where I'm at. Like in April, I'll be in Nebraska. In May, I'll be in Haiti. And then I go to Atlanta at some point. I think that's in maybe June or July. I forgot. And then Yeah, so like just let me
He's
know
being
and I'll
modest
tell
too.
you
He
where
has a
I'm
book
going to
coming
be.
out in August.
Oh, and a book coming out
Book
as well.
coming out.
Well, we'll have to have you back on to talk about the book when it comes
Yes.
out.
Oh yeah, I have a book coming out.
Oh yeah.
Just
What's
that
thing?
little thing I wrote.
Yeah.
Well, we will definitely have you back on to talk about that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
And we'll let you get back to Mardi Gras.
Yes.
Say hi to everybody for us, all the thousands of people that'll be.
I was going to say all 98,000 million
Yep.
people that's here.
Go collect a lot of extra beads for us, so when we get down there, we can have our own Mardi Gras.
Oh, you don't have to worry. There'll still be beads even in
Oh,
November.
really?
Oh, beads are year
I've
round.
never been.
Here.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care. And Crystal, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for coming on.
And we'll talk to you in the future as well.
Sounds good.
Bye,
Have a
Crystal.
Good night now.
All right.
Bye.
Good night.
All right, y'all have a good night. Thank you again.
You
Thank
as well.
you.
Thank you. That is Crystal Madison and Sen Moise. Sen Moise joining us all the way from New Orleans so we
Yes.
can find out really the truth behind some of this stuff. And we're going to take a break for the news coming up at midnight. When we come back, why don't we do a little bit of a wrap up?
Yeah, let's do that.
I feel like there's still some things that I want to discuss a little bit amongst the group here. And we can take your calls as well. 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. If you have any thoughts or questions, we'll just do like another 15, 20 minutes when we come back after the news. And we'll try and see if we can get some more thoughts going around here, because I want to get into some more of the local side of things, and I don't want to bother the folks that aren't from here with some of these other things from the local angle that may or may not have any relation to their areas of expertise. So we'll do that coming up on the other side. Again, 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420 are the numbers to call in. You can also email us spookykrew@spookysouthcoast.com. You can jump in the chat room at spookytv@spookysouthcoast.com. You can also find us on Twitter at SpookySC, or use the hashtag SpookyLive. So we're going to take a quick break for the news. You will hear all the national headlines. And when we come back on the other side, more discussion about voodoo, more discussion about these local cases that have been plaguing us over the last few weeks, with more Spooky South Coast coming up. So I want